Washington, ghost-like objects dart across the radar screen at the CAA Traffic Control Center at National Airport for several hours, traveling more than 100 miles an hour. Air Force jet fighters spend several hours chasing the objects plotted on the radar scope.
Something else is out there.
There's something else out there, okay.
Of all the banks and braes of bonny Scotland, none holds more fascination than the murky waters of Loch Ness.
Tell me, do you think there is life on other planets?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I suppose there would be.
No, he seems definite. You seem
Definitely.
definite. How do you see this life and where?
Oh, I've seen a flying saucer.
Blackwater Media presents Darkfall. Real-life encounters with the paranormal and the unexplained. Just over 30 years ago, I had an experience that totally redefined my concepts of reality and fear. I've only rarely spoken of it, but I think now enough time has passed, and people should know about the existence of such things. This goes back to the winter of 1988. I was 20 years old at the time. I remember that day vividly, not just because of what ended up happening, but even before that. It was just one of those days that paints a permanent picture in your consciousness. The sunset was clear and golden through the cold, crisp winter air. I stepped out onto the porch, lit a cigarette, and caught the fading sunlight hitting the large abandoned barn on the property next door. The barn had always kind of creeped me out as a kid. It was filled with rusty old equipment. The outer planks were all rotten and it sagged and leaned in every direction. I remember as a boy my dad telling me to stay away from it as the whole thing could collapse. On that evening, though, I saw sunlight coming through the gaps in the siding of the old barn. But all of a sudden, something caught my attention. There was some movement. The light flickered, but I couldn't really tell what it was at first. Then whatever it was, turned its head back and looked straight at me. It was at least 6.5 or 7 feet tall, if not more. It was dark colored, and it had a dog or wolf-like appearance, pointy nose, and really big pointy ears. I ran into the house to grab a flashlight. When I got back outside, I shined it toward the barn door and caught the creature dashing out across the field toward the wood line. Now let me tell you, this thing was moving faster than any animal I've ever seen. Then for some reason it stopped, turned, and looked back at me dead in the eyes and stood up on 2 legs. For maybe 5 seconds our eyes locked, and it was the most horrifying 5 seconds of my life. It dropped back down on 4 legs and ran off until it disappeared into the woods. Somehow, I had the courage to walk out towards the barn to look for tracks. Nothing. The ground was cold and hard. Later on, I spoke to a neighbor who had seen something they described as the size of a buffalo but the shape of a wolf in the same barn a few months earlier. The neighbor said that he and his family had been so frightened by what they'd seen that they were in near hysterics for days. The man told me that he'd taken his shotgun and searched the barn, but found nothing there. So like I said, that was more than 30 years ago, and I can honestly say that talking about this now has brought back some very old feelings of fear and apprehension. One of the things I realized recently about what happened was how vulnerable I was at the time of the experience. The creature was so big and so fast that I know that it could have done whatever it wanted to. Back in the 80s, I didn't know the term cryptozoology, but I certainly knew then and read through the years about people who'd seen creatures like El Chupacabra, Bigfoot, Mothman, and also, of course, UFOs. I realized that if the creature that I encountered existed, then all of this shit was possible. And more than that, when I think of all the sightings and encounters with all of these things accumulating down through the decades, even centuries, I have no doubt that existing among us is a wild, bizarre menagerie of monsters.